In our later years, who will be the one to accompany us to the end? Today, we share the greatest tragedy of life, growing old without anyone by our side. It turns out we were all mistaken. Nowadays, people no longer hold deep family values as before. Once children grow up, they mostly leave their hometowns to make a living elsewhere, leaving their parents behind to become empty nesters. Young parents often urge their daughters not to marry far away and their sons not to settle too far, for they deeply understand that once too far apart, they cannot guarantee the continuity of family ties or ensure support in old age. Everyone wishes to live out their remaining years in peace, but reality often brings tragedy. Behind those silent doors are the lonely and sorrowful figures of elderly people, helpless, desperate, and unknown to the world, silently crying out. They are a group of elderly people who have been neglected for too long, a long-standing vulnerable group. The Korean film Miss Granny, winner of the Best Screenplay Award at the Canadian International Film Festival, showcases various states of the elderly. Peel away the layers of their seemingly stable lives, and you'll find the heartbreaking loneliness and helplessness they endure. They struggle, worn out and weary, facing continuous tragedies that often go unnoticed because of their frailty. Bereft of many loved ones and friends due to age and infirmity, they receive disdain for their inability and are left to despair. Under such hopelessness, their only choice seems to be death, and some don't even have the right to choose that. The plight of elderly isolation is severe in China, a country experiencing significant aging. It's estimated that by 2030, the number of empty nest elderly over 60 in China will exceed 200 million. The increase in the elderly population will inevitably burden the younger generation, who, for the sake of survival, must focus more on work, leading to a diminishing of family bonds. The dream of having children visit home often becomes a luxury. Elderly people understand this and often choose not to express their longing for their children. Thus, loneliness becomes the norm. We often witness a situation where young people visiting their elders becomes a source of envy and praise, bringing joy and pride to the elderly. Loneliness becomes a habit, and any external companionship becomes a source of great satisfaction. The protagonist in Miss Granny, Soo-young, is an elderly woman abandoned by her family and left alone, even losing her only son. Unmarried her whole life, she finds herself utterly alone in her old age. With no work capacity left, she resorts to becoming a street vendor. Her past was marked by hardships, and her present is one of despair. Even a sudden encounter with a stranger's child brings her solace and meaning to life. This is not mere happiness, it's irony. When one grows old without support, they must lower their expectations infinitely to find spiritual richness. It's a tragic reflection of our society, where changes have shifted people's priorities. Previously, people rushed to start families and careers, but now many young people embrace being single. Emotional connections are fading, and from preferring to live alone to deciding not to marry, many prioritize financial security over emotional fulfillment. After all, they've already complied with societal norms in their youth, so in old age, they just want to sit back and relax, devoid of expectations for marriage or children, seeking to avoid any future uncertainties. However, such notions often crumble under pressure. Soo-young's friend, Chung-soon, though economically stable, falls victim to dementia, left alone as his family and friends gradually abandon him. He becomes a husk of his former self, devoid of cognition, memory, or recognition, sitting alone day after day until his eventual demise. No one can guarantee a sickness-free old age or ensure constant companionship. Aging is an unpredictable adventure, and there's a type of death called lonely death prevalent across the globe. People fear growing old not just for the physical decline, but for the dread of abandonment and the agony of solitary existence. Many fantasize about their old age filled with travel, dancing, and retirement homes with friends, but reality is often harsh. Take, for instance, the case of Grandpa Song, bedridden after a stroke, abandoned by his children and left to suffer. When Soo-young visits him, he finally finds someone to confide in, revealing his despair and pleading for help to end his life. Instances like these, and even more brutal ones, where indifference reigns, friends vanish, and life becomes unbearable, drive individuals to contemplate suicide, as they see no hope for a better tomorrow. This phenomenon is not confined to any specific region, it's prevalent globally. In Japan, for example, there's a documentary called The Cleaners of Lonely Deaths, introducing a unique profession of cleaning up after those who die alone. Suicide doesn't qualify as a lonely death, it's the unanticipated, unseen deaths that fit the bill. Lonely deaths are on the rise, especially in areas where human connections are fading. This trend is also observable in China, particularly in remote rural areas where the young migrate, leaving the elderly behind in empty homes. Their lives are characterized by loneliness and monotony, with every day resembling the last. Some may argue that they seem occupied enough, but when every meal, drink, and moment is solitary, with each day mirroring the last, can one truly feel fulfilled? Many young people believe that providing financial support is the epitome of filial piety, oblivious to the emotional yearning and humility in the eyes of the elderly. In Hemingway's renowned novel The Old Man and the Sea, the elderly fisherman fears loneliness despite his occupation requiring solitude. The old man, bent by life's burdens, acknowledges and fears loneliness, yet he cannot escape it. Fishing may distract him momentarily, but it only serves to numb his senses, for he knows he is alone, unable to evade his solitude. So, loneliness may seem to be growing younger, but true loneliness has never left the elderly. Soo-young, during an interview, reflects on his impoverished past, devoid of explanation as he's never had anything to explain. He feels empty and numb, much like the journey of many elderly people from the last century. When reaching old age with nothing, that's the ultimate loneliness. Reality often sees us as insignificant beings, unable to control our lives or determine our fates. Soo-young represents the longing in the hearts of lonely elderly people, wishing for liberation but feeling trapped in their circumstances. Embracing acceptance is the best choice, for life still holds value, and there's beauty even in the mundane. As Ram Dass once said, only through embracing pain can we accept our souls, enabling us to face hardships with strength. Ultimately, life is fleeting, and for children, cherishing their elders is crucial, as they, like children, need care and attention. It's about securing a stable future for oneself. For in old age, only companionship truly matters. That concludes today's sharing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe. Your comments and shares are welcomed. You'll never be alone here.